let me ask you something uncomfortable. Why is it that every night you say, tomorrow I'll start, and every morning you do the exact same shit, same phone, same scrolling, same excuses, same, I'll do it later. You don't wake up and choose failure. You don't consciously decide to stay stuck. And yet, here you are, again. And before you say, I just need more motivation, let me stop you right there. Motivation is what lazy people worship because it lets them blame something abstract instead of confronting something real. Because the truth is darker than you think. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not unmotivated. You're conditioned. Your life is running on autopilot and you are not the one holding the controls. And once you realize why that is, you'll never look at your behavior the same way again. This video is based on the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Charles Duhigg is an investigative journalist for the New York Times, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, and, more importantly, someone who didn't write this book to make you feel good about yourself. He wrote it to explain something most people don't want to hear. Your life is mostly a collection of habits you didn't consciously choose. This video is made under fair use for educational and commentary purposes. We're not here to read the book to you. We're here to weaponize its ideas against the parts of your life that are keeping you small. And let me be very clear, this is not a self-help video. This is a self-exposure video. Because Duhigg's central idea is simple and brutal. Once a behavior becomes a habit, the brain stops asking for permission. That means your eating habits, your scrolling habits, your emotional reactions, your procrastination, your self-sabotage are not moral failures. They're neurological shortcuts. And here's where this gets uncomfortable. Most people don't fail because they lack intelligence or potential. They fail because they never audit their patterns. They live their entire lives reacting, never realizing that their reactions were programmed years ago. This book exposes how habits are formed, why willpower is unreliable, why trying harder almost never works, and why one small habit can quietly reshape your entire identity. But I'm not going to spoon feed this to you. I'm going to do what I do best. Call out the lies you've been telling yourself and replace them with something far more dangerous, understanding. Because once you understand how habits work, you lose the comfort of ignorance. And from that point on, your life changing or staying the same is no longer an accident. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The invisible program running your life. The uncomfortable truth the book opens with is not subtle and it's not poetic. It's clinical, it's brutal, and it goes something like this. Most of what you think of as your life is just repetition with a personality attached. You wake up, reach for your phone, check the same apps, react to the same headlines, eat the same foods, complain about the same things, soothe yourself the same way, distract yourself the same way, fall asleep the same way, and then you call it a day. Or worse, you call it who you are. The book starts with real people whose lives changed dramatically, not because they suddenly became disciplined or inspired, but because one small behavior shifted and everything else collapsed into place behind it. Smoking stopped, running started, debt disappeared, careers stabilized, relationships changed, and the key detail most people miss is this. None of that happened because of motivation. It happened because the brain found a new default. Neuroscience doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about efficiency. Your brain is an energy hoarding machine. It evolved to keep you alive, not fulfilled. And one of the most efficient ways it saves energy is by automating behavior. When a pattern repeats enough times, your brain hands it off to a deeper, older structure and stops asking questions. That's not a metaphor. That's anatomy. The basal ganglia literally takes control while the thinking part of your brain clocks out. This is why you can drive home and not remember the drive. Why you open the fridge without hunger, why you scroll without interest, why you explode emotionally, and don't know why until later. The decision already happened. Consciousness just arrived late. The book breaks this automation down into a loop, a cue, a routine, and a reward. Something triggers you. You do something. You get something. Repeat it enough times and the loop runs itself. The disturbing part is not that this exists. The disturbing part is that once the loop is installed, your brain defends it like survival software. That's why knowledge alone never changes behavior. You already know what you should eat. You already know scrolling doesn't make you happy. You already know procrastination is costing you years. And yet, here you are. Because knowing doesn't compete with automation. Look at the world right now. Inflation squeezing households across the US, people working more, earning less, stressed out, exhausted. And what happens? Comfort habits spike, alcohol sales rise, ultra-processed food consumption increases, screen time explodes. Not because people are stupid, because under pressure, the brain doesn't innovate. It regresses to the most familiar loop that promises relief. The book uses patients with severe memory loss to prove something terrifying. Even when memory disappears, habits remain. People who cannot remember their own past can still walk familiar routes, react emotionally, get angry, calm themselves, repeat behaviors that no longer make logical sense. That means habits don't live in your identity, they live beneath it. And that should scare you, because if habits persist without memory, then your sense of self is far more fragile than you think. You are not your intentions. You are not your goals. You are not your plans. You are what you repeat when no one is watching and no thinking is required. The economy doesn't exploit this by accident. Neither do corporations. Neither do social platforms. Predictability is profitable. A person who runs on habit is easier to sell to, easier to influence, easier to keep anxious, distracted, and consuming. This isn't conspiracy, it's business. The book's real punch isn't about habits being bad. Habits are neutral. They protect you. They free mental space. Without them, you'd be paralyzed by choice. But the same system that lets you function also traps you, because once a habit is installed, your brain stops asking if it still serves you. That's where the danger is. You think you're choosing, but you're repeating. You think you're deciding, but you're executing. You think you're stuck because life is hard, but you're stuck because your brain found a way to stop thinking. And until you see that clearly, nothing changes. Key idea. Most of your life runs on automatic neurological loops designed for efficiency, not happiness or growth. Key takeaway. You don't change your life by thinking harder. You change it by interrupting the patterns your brain no longer questions. Favorite quote? Once a habit is formed, the brain stops fully participating in decision making. Why you can't stop, even when you want to. The story moves from automation into something far more uncomfortable, because once you understand that habits run automatically, the next question becomes obvious. If habits are so efficient, why do some of them feel impossible to stop, even when they're destroying you? This is where the book stops being polite and starts being honest. Because the real engine behind habits is not reward, it's craving. And most people get this backwards their entire lives. Early habit research showed something strange. When scientists trained rats to run a maze for food, their brains didn't light up most when they ate. The spike happened before the reward arrived, the moment the rat recognized the cue. Anticipation, not satisfaction, was doing the work. Dopamine wasn't saying, "This feels good." It was saying, "This is coming." That distinction matters more than you want it to. The book walks through how some of the most powerful habits in modern history were engineered not by improving rewards, but by creating cravings. Toothpaste didn't take over the world because clean teeth were pleasurable. It took over because advertisers taught people to crave the tingle. That minty burn became the signal that something was working. No tingle, no satisfaction. The habit wasn't brushing. The habit was chasing the sensation. The same logic shows up everywhere. Gambling addictions don't thrive on winning. They thrive on near misses. Social media doesn't hook you because every post is amazing. It hooks you because sometimes it is. Variable rewards train the brain to crave possibility, not outcomes. This isn't accidental, it's neurological leverage. Now zoom out to the world you're living in right now. Economic pressure rising globally. Housing costs climbing in Europe, North America, and parts of Asia. Job insecurity everywhere. When uncertainty increases, craving systems go into overdrive. The brain looks for predictability and relief. That's when compulsive habits tighten their grip. Doom scrolling, binge watching, comfort eating, overworking, emotional numbing disguised as productivity. And this is where people lie to themselves. They say they lack discipline. They say they need motivation. They say once things calm down, they'll change. But motivation fades because it lives in the thinking brain, and habits live somewhere older. You don't break habits by arguing with them. You break them by understanding what they're feeding on. The book shows how once a craving is established, the habit runs even when the reward disappears. Smokers keep smoking when cigarettes stop tasting good. Shoppers keep buying things that don't make them happy. Workers chase promotions they don't even want anymore. The brain learned to want the process, not the payoff. And here's the part no one likes to hear. This is not a flaw, it's a feature. Your brain evolved to anticipate resources before they arrive. In modern life, that same system is hijacked by engineered cues and artificial rewards. The problem isn't that you crave. The problem is that you rarely question what you're craving or who benefits from it. The book makes it painfully clear that information alone never competes with craving. You can know something is bad for you and still want it with your whole nervous system. That's why public health warnings don't stop addiction. That's why productivity advice doesn't stop procrastination. That's why people repeat behaviors they openly hate. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because your brain learned too well and nobody ever taught you how to unlearn. Key idea: habits are powered by craving, not reward. And once anticipation is wired into the brain, behavior becomes compulsive. Key takeaway: you don't change behavior by chasing better outcomes. You change it by rewiring what your brain has learned to want. Favorite quote: cravings are what drive habits, and figuring out how to spark a craving makes habits easier to create. The only way habits ever actually change. What finally snaps people out of denial is realizing that effort has never been the missing ingredient. If effort worked, everyone who swore this time is different would already be living a different life. They're not. And that's because the brain doesn't erase habits, it replaces them. That's the rule nobody wants because it kills the fantasy of starting fresh. The book gets very blunt here. You cannot delete a habit any more than you can delete a scar. Once a loop exists, it's permanent. Cue, routine, reward, burned into neural circuitry. What can change is what you do when the cue hits. Same trigger, same craving, different behavior. Everything else is noise. This is why willpower collapses under stress. Willpower is a resource, not a strategy. It's fragile, emotional, and easily drained by life. And life right now is doing a phenomenal job at draining people. Rising costs, unstable work, constant alerts, endless comparison. People don't relapse because they're immoral. They relapse because the old routine is familiar, and familiarity feels like safety when the world feels unstable. The book uses addiction recovery as the clearest proof. Alcoholics. Anonymous didn't succeed because it made people stronger. It succeeded because it gave people replacement routines. Same cue, stress or temptation. Same reward, relief or connection. New behavior, calling someone, going to a meeting, praying, even if you don't believe. It wasn't logic that saved people. It was structure. And here's where belief quietly enters the picture, even for people who hate that word. The book shows that replacement only sticks when people believe change is possible. Not in a motivational poster way, but in a social, identity-based way. When you're surrounded by others who act as if change is normal, your brain stops treating it like a threat. This is why isolated self-improvement fails, and why communities, for better or worse, shape behavior so powerfully. Look around globally. People who move cities, change environments, or shift social circles often change habits effortlessly. Same person, different defaults. Meanwhile, people who stay in the same environment try to discipline their way out and burn out. The difference isn't character, it's cues. The book dismantles the self-help myth that resistance builds strength. Resistance builds exhaustion. Replacement builds momentum. You don't fight a habit head on, you redirect it. Like water finding the lowest point, behavior follows the easiest path available. If the only path you give yourself is struggle, don't be shocked when you quit. This is deeply uncomfortable because it means your identity isn't as fixed as you pretend. You are not someone who always fails. You're someone who keeps responding the same way to the same triggers. Change the response and the story rewrites itself without asking permission. And yes, belief matters. Not mystical belief, but practical belief. The belief that tomorrow doesn't have to be a rerun. The belief that other people have escaped loops just as entrenched as yours. The belief that replacing one small behavior is enough to destabilize an entire pattern. Key idea: habits cannot be erased, only replaced, and lasting change depends on swapping routines while keeping the same cues and rewards. Key takeaway: stop trying to overpower your habits and start redesigning the responses your brain already expects. Favorite quote: you can't extinguish a bad habit, you can only change it. The habits that control groups, companies, and power. At some point, the book stops pretending this is just about your morning routine and starts exposing something far more unsettling. Because habits don't stop at individuals, they scale, and once they scale, they become power. What looks like culture is often just a collection of habits that nobody remembers choosing. The book shows this through organizations that didn't succeed because they were smarter, kinder, or more ethical, but because they identified one behavior that quietly reorganized everything else. These are keystone habits. Change one, and dozens of others fall in line without needing micromanagement or motivation speeches. One of the clearest examples is a manufacturing company that didn't try to fix productivity, morale, or profits directly. Leadership obsessed over safety, relentlessly. Meetings, reports, public accountability. Injuries dropped, yes, but something stranger happened. Communication improved, trust increased. Workers spoke up about problems before disasters happened. Costs fell, profits rose. Not because safety magically creates money, but because habits are interconnected. Fix the right one, and the system reorganizes itself. This matters because most institutions fail by attacking symptoms instead of patterns. Governments throw policies at outcomes. Companies throw perks at burnout. Schools throw discipline at disengagement. And nothing changes because the underlying routines stay intact. Then the book turns darker, because habits don't just shape productivity, they shape obedience. Crises are the most powerful habit reset mechanisms ever discovered. When systems break, people look for structure, and whoever provides that structure gets to install new defaults. Sometimes that's benevolent, often it's not. You see this everywhere. Economic crashes leading to emergency laws that never fully roll back. Corporate scandals followed by temporary surveillance measures. Workplaces using uncertainty to normalize overwork and constant availability. The book isn't saying this is always malicious. It's saying it's predictable. In chaos, humans crave routine more than freedom. Then there's the part that makes people uncomfortable because it implicates them as willing participants. Companies don't need mind control, they need data. If behavior follows patterns, patterns can be predicted, and predicted behavior can be nudged. The book details how retailers learn to anticipate life changes before customers consciously recognize them. pregnancy, relocation, stress cycles. Habits destabilize during transitions, and that's when new ones stick. This isn't uniquely American, it's global. From mobile payment adoption in Asia to algorithmic shopping nudges in Europe, the same logic applies. Find the moment of instability, offer a routine, promise relief. Look at current economic headlines, layoffs paired with flexibility, inflation paired with subscription models that quietly drain accounts. AI productivity tools sold as empowerment while normalizing constant output. None of this works unless people already live on autopilot. The uncomfortable implication is this: if you don't choose your habits, someone else will. Institutions don't need to convince you ideologically, they just need to make the desired behavior easier than resisting it. And here's the part most people miss. Organizations are not evil because they use habits, they're powerful because they understand them. The same mechanics that let communities heal also let systems exploit. Habits are neutral, intent isn't. The book forces you to see that culture isn't values written on walls. It's routines enforced quietly, repeatedly, and without debate. What gets rewarded, what gets ignored, what gets punished. Do that long enough and people stop noticing they're being shaped. Key idea: large-scale power comes from shaping keystone habits that quietly restructure entire systems of behavior. Key takeaway: if you don't consciously choose the habits governing your workplace, community, or society, you will live inside ones designed by someone else. Favorite quote: when habits change, so does power. Are you really in control of your life? By the time the book reaches its final stretch, it stops pretending this is just about productivity, self-control, or getting your life together. It asks a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding, because answering it removes the last comfortable excuse. If habits shape behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes, then where does responsibility actually live? The book opens this question through moments in history where individuals didn't look powerful, motivated, or heroic. They looked ordinary, tired, afraid, uncertain, and yet entire society shifted because enough people changed one shared pattern at the same time. Take the famous boycott that reshaped civil rights history. It didn't succeed because everyone suddenly became morally enlightened. It succeeded because social habits changed. People stopped riding buses together. Churches became organizing hubs. Peer pressure flipped direction. What had once been normal became socially unacceptable almost overnight. The book makes it painfully clear. Movements don't win arguments first. They change routines first. Beliefs follow behavior, not the other way around. This same mechanism shows up in modern movements across the world. From labor strikes in Europe to student protests in Asia to mass walkouts and digital organizing everywhere else. People rarely act alone. They act when their environment quietly tells them, people like us do things like this. That's where free will gets uncomfortable. Neuroscience shows that many decisions are made milliseconds before we're aware of them. The brain acts, then consciousness explains. This doesn't mean you're a robot. It means responsibility doesn't live in the moment of action. It lives in the habits you allow to form beforehand. The book doesn't let you off the hook. It doesn't say, your brain made you do it, and move on. It argues the opposite. Once you understand how habits work, ignorance is gone. Responsibility shifts earlier in the chain to what cues you tolerate, what routines you reinforce, what environments you stay in even when you know they're shaping you. This matters now more than ever. In a world of constant outrage cycles, algorithmic feeds, and economic anxiety, people are reacting instead of choosing. Social media outrage becomes a daily ritual. Political identity becomes a habit. Consuming bad news becomes a form of emotional self-harm disguised as awareness. None of this feels like choice because it isn't happening at the moment you think it is. The book's most uncomfortable claim is also its most hopeful one. Habits don't just trap individuals, they can liberate them. The same systems that create conformity can create courage. The same peer pressure that keeps people silent can make speaking up feel inevitable. History doesn't change because of lone geniuses. It changes because enough people adopt new defaults at the same time. So, no, you're not fully in control in the way self-help culture pretends. But you're also not helpless. Control doesn't mean forcing every decision. It means choosing which patterns get to decide for you when you're tired, stressed, or afraid. That's the quiet agency the book ends on. Not dramatic freedom, not endless willpower, just a sober understanding that your future self is being shaped right now by the habits you repeat today, whether you're paying attention or not. Key idea: free will isn't about controlling every action, it's about taking responsibility for the habits that make actions automatic. Key takeaway: once you understand how habits shape individuals and societies, choosing which patterns you live inside becomes a moral decision, not a motivational one. Favorite quote: the choices that are most powerful are often the ones we don't realize we're making. Conclusion: by the time you reach the end of this story, something should feel uncomfortable. Not inspired, not hyped, uncomfortable. Because the most dangerous lie this book destroys is the one that says your life is the result of big, dramatic decisions. It's not. It's the result of the small ones you stop noticing. Everything you've heard up to this point circles the same quiet truth from different angles. Your brain is not broken, it's efficient, it automates, it protects energy, it hands control to habits because thinking all the time would burn you out. That's not a flaw, that's survival. But in a world designed to hijack that survival system, efficiency turns into a cage. You don't wake up and choose your future, you rehearse it. Every scroll, every excuse, every automatic reaction, every time you say later instead of now. The book shows this again and again in individuals, in companies, in governments, in movements. Behavior hardens into routine. Routine becomes identity. Identity becomes destiny. And here's the part most people miss. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about waking up to the fact that you've been living inside patterns you never consciously agreed to. Patterns shaped by childhood, by stress, by culture, by economic pressure, by algorithms that know your cravings better than you do, by systems that benefit when you stay predictable. That's why motivation keeps failing you. Motivation fights habits head on. Habits don't fight fair. They wait until you're tired, until you're scared, until you're overwhelmed. Then they take over and call it just who I am. The book doesn't offer comfort. It offers responsibility, not blame. Responsibility. Once you understand how habits work, pretending you're powerless becomes a choice. And that's the line you don't get to cross anymore. Change doesn't come from heroic effort. It comes from boring, deliberate redesign. From choosing different defaults. From replacing, not resisting. From understanding that belief isn't magic, it's permission. Permission to act differently when the cue hits. Permission to step out of the loop instead of pretending you'll brute force your way out later. Zoom out far enough and this stops being personal. Societies rise and fall on shared habits. Economies wobble because consumption is habitual. Movements succeed because routines spread faster than ideas. Power consolidates wherever behavior becomes predictable. And yet, the same mechanism that traps you is the one that frees you. Habits don't care who you used to be. They care what you repeat next. That's the final message. You are not your intentions. You are not your potential. You are not the story you tell yourself at night. You are what you do when your brain goes on autopilot. Change that, and the rest follows quietly, almost unfairly easily. If any of this hit a nerve, don't treat it like content, treat it like a mirror. And if you want the full depth, the research, the stories that didn't fit in this breakdown, buy the book. Read it slowly. let it ruin your excuses, because the most terrifying thing in this entire story is also the most hopeful. Your life is not controlled by fate, it's controlled by habits, and habits can be changed. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That means it worked. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns that don't coddle you. Share this with someone who keeps saying one day. And remember this, long after this video ends, the future isn't built by big moments. It's built by what you repeat when no one is watching.